My pleasure today to introduce Jordan Smith from the Department of Environment and, oh God, ENVS, Environmental Society. Yeah, Environment and Society, sorry. I know ENVS, I know Watts, I know Wild, that's how go like. I'm here today talking about shifting trends in outdoor recreation. He came to Utah State University in 2016. He's the director of the Outdoor Recreation Program up at Utah State University. Before that, he came from North Carolina State, where he'd been there since 2011, and I'm not going to take any more of your time, so go ahead.
Great, thanks, Tom. Yeah, well, I appreciate everybody coming over for lunch break and not enjoying April outside. But it's a really good timing to actually talk about what I'm going to be covering today. So as Tom mentioned, I direct the Institute of Outdoor Recreation and Tourism up at Utah State. If you're not familiar with the Institute, we were created in 1998 by Utah State Legislature to basically be a research and information source to different federal land management agencies, state land management agencies, private landowners, and different municipalities and cities throughout Utah. Basically provide them with information, data, and resources on the benefits and drawbacks of providing outdoor recreation resources on public and private lands. So we do a whole bunch of research projects. We manage all the visitor use projects for the Wasatch National Forest. Work on some smaller projects with Utah State Parks and some individual projects with nonprofit groups like Utah Snowmobile Association I'll highlight today. So my presentation today, I wanted to provide a big overview of some of the large sociodemographic and environmental factors that have shifted outdoor recreation use, outdoor recreation participation in the state over the past 15, 20 years, and those factors that are going to shape outdoor recreation use over the coming 30 or 40 years. So the major factors that I'm going to primarily key on and discuss are population growth, climate change, and also discuss shifting preferences and the ways that people are actually participating in outdoor recreation and how that affects how we actually manage recreational resources throughout the state. So as I mentioned, at the Institute, we provide data and information to communities, to federal land management agencies, to state land management agencies. So the structure of my presentation today is going to be providing a little bit of data on each of these key drivers of outdoor recreation use, and then providing some detailed information about how managers can respond to each of those drivers. All right, so let's get started with population growth. And everybody here, obviously being Utah residents, knows that Utah is definitely growing, growing a lot. But we have to put Utah kind of in context of other Western states if we think of how we should actually efficiently manage outdoor recreation. So Utah, relative to other Western states, this is a chart of population growth from 1995 to 2025. Population growth in Utah and as well as other Western states, excluding the Pacific West, California, Oregon, and Washington, obviously, on this chart. So we all know Utah is growing. It's growing rapidly, but it's not growing as much as Arizona, Colorado, or New Mexico. So our neighbors to the east and to the south are growing a little bit faster. And Utah's population growth rate is actually starting to decline. It's not to mean that the growth rate is negative, but it's starting to taper off a little bit. So what does this actually mean for recreation management throughout the state? Knowing that there's going to be a lot more people in Utah recreating on public and private lands. It's basically the biggest finding or the biggest implication it has for resource managers is that resource managers will have to prepare for more demand for outdoor recreation use kind of across the board. For almost every single activity that we look at, we know that outdoor recreation use participation is going to increase in the future. There's not one activity that there's really going to be expect fewer number of people participating in that activity throughout the state. And this is at federal lands, at state lands, and private lands. So of all the key kind of findings or the key takeaways that I can mention from today's presentation, I thought I'm most confident in, and one that's not surprising. People are coming, Utahns are making more Utahns, and so we need to kind of get ready to meet that demand. The second implication for this is that conflict at over access at many areas throughout the state will continue to grow. We know that as more individuals move into the state, or as more people actually, as populations of suburban and more rural areas continue to grow, there's going to be more demand for access for recreational resources. So a lot of the conflicts that we see over continued access to public and private lands will continue to grow as more people have that demand for participating in outdoor recreation. And the final implication of just a general large growth in the population in the years to come is that the economic impacts of outdoor recreation, the economic benefits that Utah gets from outdoor recreation will continue to grow. You know, it's just for more people, we have more people spending money on buying outdoor recreation products. There's a lot more economic activity generated from outdoor recreation. And why I say it might actually, the economic benefits of outdoor recreation might actually outpace population growth is because even as Utah's population growth is starting to taper off, we're getting a lot of development in the state for amenity migration. So local destinations marketing themselves as industries or as locations for high technology, high professional, high-tech, high professional employment destinations where we get individuals who tend to have very high incomes, have a lot of disposable income, and those are the individuals who primarily tend to spend a lot of money on outdoor recreation products and drive a lot of the outdoor recreation industry throughout the state. So the key example for this, or probably the most notable example for this, is the area down in Draper, Alpine area, the Silicon Slopes area. A lot of those jobs are being created not primarily to attract Utahns from other portions of the state to that area, but trying to attract individuals who might have competing job offers in San Francisco or Seattle or Denver, and trying to get them to come to the Wasatch Front. All right, so it's not all just about more people in the state. It's about the age profile of those people and their racial and ethnic composition. So I'll look into a little bit of two of those little pieces of information next. So this is the population pyramid for Utah in 2015. So it's considered pretty much current. So population pyramid, now it's really kind of hard to see, but we have men on the left and women on the right, and each of these horizontal bars going up are 5-year increments. So the bottom bar is the population in the 0 to 4 age bracket. The next bar up is population in the 5 to 9 bracket, and then 10 to 14, all the way up until you get really old. So what we basically see here is the demographic profile of the state. Utah is a little bit unique when we compare it to other western states, and we have always known that Utah has a very young population. We have a lot of people in the age brackets of, under 25, under 30. But when we look at how Utah's population is going to age and going to change over the next 10 years, we see that a similar trend that we're seeing in many other western states, and many other states actually around the country generally, is that the population at the bottom of the pyramid isn't really expanding, but we're seeing more population get old. The greater population is large, and a segment of the population right now that's 30 to 40 in the middle of from this pyramid now will be entering that 50 to 65-year-old age bracket, and so they will be comprising a greater proportion of the population in the next 10 years relative to those individuals who are under 10, under 20. So our younger population is going to stay relatively about the same amount of numbers, while our older population continues to increase. And this has implications for how we manage and think about where outdoor recreation activities are happening in the state. So again, it's like a mouse moving its way through a snake. We get this big bubble that moves its way up this population pyramid, right? So what it means for outdoor recreation in Utah is that we have a lot of these individuals who are right now comprised in that middle of that population pyramid, who traditionally participate in what we call more traditional outdoor recreation activities. Snowmobiling, RV, camping, people that participate in hunting and fishing. And what we're seeing is that those individuals who, as they age out of the population pyramid, or hit an age where they start to decline in the outdoor recreation participation, that 65, 70 year age mark, that same activities that they have participated in all their life aren't being replaced by their younger generation. So the younger generation is starting to pick up different activities, individuals who snowmobile, who own OHVs, who own RVs, their children's children are much more likely to pick up different, more alternative outdoor recreation activities, trail hiking, trail running, rock climbing, as opposed to adopting the same types of activities that their parents did. So I highlight snowmobile use here because we just did a study for the Utah Snowmobile Association where this information kind of really came to a point. We've done studies in the past where we look at estimate like the economic impact of a specific activity. We looked at the economic, they hired us to estimate the economic impact of snowmobiling throughout the state. And so we compared the same numbers that we had, the number of registered OHV owners that we had when we previously conducted the study in 2001 to the number of registered OHV, or number of registered snowmobile owners in 2017. And that number had actually declined a little bit. Right now we have just over 23,000 registered snowmobiles within the state, and that number has declined over the past 20 years, which is really surprising because the population of the state has increased about 77% over the same time period. And so you're getting all that population growth, but as individuals get older, individuals who are wealthy enough to participate in, have RVs, have snowmobiles in this case, they're not being replaced by younger generations who are interested in picking up some activities. Kind of the key finding that pointed us in this direction was that we compared the average age of snowmobile owners in 2001 and the average age of snowmobile owners in 2007. And in 2001 it was about 46 years old, and in 2007 it was about 57 years old. And so the population is getting older, and it's not being replaced by younger outdoor recreationists who want to get involved in snowmobiling. A lot of different reasons that go into this. It's very expensive to participate in these motorized outdoor recreation activities, and a lot of people that talk to, they're under 35, just don't have the investment or the capital to invest $150,000 in new snowmobiles, trailers, vehicles to tow them, the trailers themselves. So it's a big investment. There's a lot of different reasons that this is actually happening. All right, so I mentioned it's not just about total population growth, but also about the racial and ethnic composition of the population itself. So this is a chart of the minority population of Utah. We look at total, the second set of bars here is the non-Hispanic white population. So we all know, living in Utah, Utah is a very white state. But we also have heard a lot of information that Utah is becoming more diverse, which is, you kind of see here by the Hispanic, non-Hispanic, Black. These are numbers from 2010 to 2016, so we're getting, we're seeing growth in minority populations. But the key finding here is when we compare it to the actual population of individuals who identify themselves as non-Hispanic white, is that the growth rate for those minority populations in the state is slower than the growth rate for the non-Hispanic white population of the state. So we compare this to other Western states, and we really have a very unique demographic trend here that's affecting who's recreating on public lands or private lands. And we see this profile in Utah, where Utah is becoming much more of the same. We're getting much more of a white. Our population is not becoming more diverse. Our growth rate for the individuals who identify as white is growing faster than individuals who are minorities. So unlike surrounding states, what we see is Utah is not likely to see a growth in individuals who, in minority populations participating in outdoor recreation. So this is a big push for many agencies, many organizations nationally to increase minority populations, their access to the outdoors. Unfortunately, in Utah, it doesn't reflect the future age or the future racial and demographic profile of individuals within the state. So while it should be a major priority because there's a large body of literature that suggests that people of racial and ethnic minorities have a whole bunch of barriers for why they do not choose to get involved in getting involved in nature or going outside, enjoying public lands. That Utah will most likely not see an increase in minority populations using the outdoors, just primarily because the growth rates of those different populations, the white population is outpacing growth rates for minority populations within the state. All right, my final point on population growth is that it's not just about total population growth, but where that population growth is actually occurring. So again, you know that Utah is a very urban state, relatively, if you think about where most of the people live in the state. About 74% of Utah's population lives in 4 counties: Davis, Weber, Salt Lake, and Utah counties. 74% of Utah's population. All right, so we look at here population density. This is actually by census tract, but you get the same idea. Weber, Davis, Salt Lake, and Utah counties are really driving, really where most of the people live, where we see most of the economic benefits generated from outdoor recreation activity. So what does this actually mean for outdoor recreation use in the future? Well, it depends on how, are these areas, these big urban areas in Utah, these main 4 counties, going to be growing as fast as the rural areas of the state? And the fact is, yes, when we look at just these 4 counties, Utah, Weber, Salt Lake, and Davis counties, projected populations up to 2065, we see that the pace of population growth in urban areas of Utah is rapidly outpacing suburban and more rural areas of the state. And so that portion of the population now is about 74% that lives in these 4 counties. In the future, it's going to be a lot bigger than that. So this has implications for how we think about how we manage outdoor recreation. With more people living in urban areas, it opens up new opportunities to connect urban youth to outdoor recreation opportunities that are more urban proximate, that are very developed in these urban centers. And it also opens up opportunities and really highlights a need for connecting public lands, primarily when we're talking about these 4 counties, we're talking about the Uinta-Wasatch-Cache National Forest, and connecting trail systems on that on the National Forest to urban trail systems in these 4 counties, with soon to be about 80% of the population living in these forest counties. There's a big need and a big opportunity to connect individuals who live in those 4 counties to public lands directly via access. So a lot of the counties, these 4 counties are actually developing new collaborations and partnerships with the Forest Service to make sure that these connections actually exist, and that city and county trail systems match up to those trail systems that are managed by the Forest Service. And we've seen a lot of growth in the municipal and local push for these types of connected trails. A key example of this is the Ogden Greenways trail system. Actually, I'll picture both of these pictures are from up in Ogden. And we're funded by, there's a local community outdoor recreation development grant that's put on by the Office of Outdoor Recreation here in the state. And they were primarily funded through this project to connect the Ogden River pathway, the Ogden River Trail System, which is managed by the City of Ogden, to the Bonneville Shoreline Trail, which is obviously managed by the U.S. Forest Service. So we're seeing a lot of push, a lot of motivation from these urban centers to make those connections available. Again, Utah is becoming much more urban and will continue to become much more urban than it is today. All right, so now I want to shift gears a little bit and start to talk about changing environmental conditions and climate change and how that's affecting outdoor recreation participation and use throughout the state. So I'm going to highlight different trends in climate for specific geographic locations around the state, and then think about how those actually impact the outdoor recreation opportunities that are provided by surrounding natural landscapes or developed recreational amenities like ski resorts. All right, so climate change is happening. We can look at the historical data, and we see consistent examples of observed temperature increases. Primarily, the most significant trend that we see in the Intermountain West is increases in temperature, so that's what I'm going to highlight today. we look at Salt Lake City. Here is the historical record for the average annual mean temperature and average annual high temperature for the year for the historical record, which is the period about 1895, the last century, to 2015. So we have about the information here for the last 125 years. And we see that the average annual high temperature, the top bar, has increased from about 63 degrees to about 65 degrees over the past couple of years. And the average annual mean temperature has increased from about 51 degrees to about 53 degrees. And so this is pretty consistent with every geographic location across the state. We see about a 2 degrees increase in temperature over the past 115, 120 years. So what does this mean for outdoor recreational opportunities that are provided and managed for in the Intermountain West, or particularly on the Wasatch Front? We have a large body of literature that says that even though we look at areas like Salt Lake City that might be increasing by 2 degrees, there's a bigger rate of temperature increase for those urban centers due to larger areas of impervious surface. The effect of urban heat islands is that we'll see greater magnitudes of temperature increases, particularly on extreme heat event days in the summer, relative to the surrounding landscape. And so we obviously know Utah has Wasatch Front has a fairly unique geographic and topographic composition, and so when it gets very warm in the summer, it's a big push factor for individuals to want to go up into the mountains to get away from that. As climate continues to warm, as we get warmer days in the summer, we're much more likely to see that pressure, that push factor of individuals wanting to move up the elevation gradient, out of the city, to be much greater in the years to come. So this is particularly going to be seen on those extreme heat event days in the summer. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit, move up Parleys Canyon and go to Park City. Here I've looked at the same information, the same data, but we also include average annual minimum temperatures. So we look at winter recreation destinations like Park City, and the average annual minimum temperature is a lot more important for driving recreational visitation in the winter. That's primarily because outdoor recreation use in winter recreation destinations like Park City is obviously driven by skiing and snowboarding. A lot of these destinations in bad snow years, like this year, rely on snowmaking to maintain viable snow coverage in the winter. And so the average low temperatures is much more important for ensuring you can actually make snow in the winter. And so we see, again, this is about a 2 degrees increase over the mean annual average temperature and then maximum average annual temperature, and also in the minimum average annual temperature over the past 125 years. But that minimum temperature, you'll see, is starting to trend up a little bit faster than the maximum temperature in the summer. All right, so I'm going to zoom in here. This graph shows the period from 1895 to 2015. Again, it's maximum, average, and minimum temperatures. And we're going to zoom into just the past 35 years. So 2075, or excuse me, the last 40 years. 1975 to 2015. And you'll see that the rate of increase in the minimum, the average annual minimum temperature is increasing more than the average temperature, or the average annual maximum temperature. So this has big implications for winter recreation destinations like Park City. So what it means is that mountain destinations, winter mountain resorts, primarily in Park City, are going to have to continue to increasingly diversify the winter outdoor recreational opportunities that they offer to maintain economic viability over the winter months. Most of the major ski resorts in Utah have already done this. Have already started to think about offering mountain biking right now in the dead of winter, or on the shoulder seasons more often. And more importantly, it means that snowmaking will become less dependent method of maintaining viable snow coverage in the winter months as that minimum temperature, the average annual minimum temperature in the winter starts to creep above freezing. All right, so we've talked a lot about northern Utah, jump down to the southern part of Portland.
Do you mean less dependable rather than less dependent?
Less dependable, yes. Okay. It'll be becoming a less dependable method of maintaining viable coverage. And about half this ski resorts in Utah make their own snow. The major ones do. The smaller resorts, like up in Logan, Beaver, they don't, just because it's not economic. It's very expensive to put in those systems, and would be it's very unlikely that they will in the future because it's just becoming more expensive and less dependable. Okay, so let's jump down to the southern portion of the state and think about how changing temperatures down there impact outdoor recreation. So again, we see about the same 2 degrees increase in average annual maximum temperatures and average annual mean temperatures in Springdale, Utah, which is the gateway community to Zion National Park. So the temperatures here are obviously much higher. You see an average annual maximum temperature right now about 72, 73 degrees. So what does this mean for outdoor recreation visitation? Well, we see a little bit of a different trend because when we're talking about northern Utah, we're talking about the loss of winter recreational activities. In the southern portion of the state, we're starting to see recreation destinations hit a threshold, a maximum temperature, where we see visitation start to plateau. So we look at monthly visitation rates to all 5 national parks where we have really good monthly visitation data, everybody that goes in a gate in a national park, and we see that the destinations, Arches, Canyonlands, Capitol Reef, once the temperature gets above 85 degrees, the average daily temperature gets above 85 degrees, that visitation starts to plateau, right? And we're seeing this a lot of different literature, not just in Utah, but also around the world that we see the same pattern. But as that average daily temperature gets about 85 degrees, visitation starts to plateau. But you've obviously heard probably on the news within the past month that visitation to Bryce Canyon and Zion continues to grow. And we see this as a unique exception. We have these 2 unique destinations in Utah where we see visitation continue to rise despite that temperature getting above, that average daily temperature getting above 85 degrees. So we see plotted out here the average visitation, or the mean monthly visitation between the years 1979 and 2014, and you'll see Arches, Canyonlands, and Capitol Reef all plateau between May and October, but Bryce Canyon still continues to peak up, and Zion is now getting over about 400,000 visitors in the summer months, maybe some visitors in the month. There's no signs of visitation to Zion and Bryce slowing down despite the warming temperatures, and this is driven by a whole bunch of different factors, primarily because visitation to they are definitely the 2 most popular national parks within the state, and because they are the ones that are on the international travel routes most often. So international visitors who tend to visit have very different responses to climate drivers relative to local visitors. So people who are coming from Japan, China, Germany, they're going to go, no matter if it's 115 degrees, they're in the tour bus, they're getting out and putting in pictures and back in, right? So we see this visitation continue to peak despite the rising temperatures. But the only cases that we actually see that are for Zion and Bryce. Every other recreation destination that we've looked at, we see plateauing visitation numbers. They're when the average daily temperature gets about 85 degrees. All right, so it's not just about geographic location. There's also differences by activity type. So I'm going to look at now some differences by major activity types, major recreational activity types that individuals actually participate in, and what's their response to climate. So you see this graph here. We see in the gray bars are our numbers. These data come from those surveys that I mentioned. We run at all the national forests across the Intermountain West, and we asked individuals what activities they participated in during their visits. And this is a project that's been going on in the Forest Service now for about the past 40 years. So we have really good longitudinal data set that we can project information out in the future to see how they respond to the climates, the weather conditions on the specific days that they were intercepted. So we look at what we call our baseline data from this in this study as 2008 participant days, and this is in millions. And so these are the top 8 outdoor recreation activities that are participated in by visitors to national forests in the Rocky Mountains. So we got to aggregate a whole bunch of different national forests together to get a good enough sample size for the entire 40-year period. So nature viewing, birding, developed site use, swimming, day hiking. We basically see in 2008 their numbers, and then the blue bars are our projected numbers of use, our projected use levels in 2060. Right, so the biggest thing I want to notice here is that we see the current levels of use, and then almost a doubling in people saying that they just go out to view nature, and almost doubling in people who participate in birding, almost a doubling in developed site use, just in response to population growth. Right, so that doesn't include climate change. And then we factor in different weather variables on the days that people were surveyed or intercepted, and we project that into the future, and we see a slight and marginal negative impact of climate affecting each of these recreational activities throughout the year. And so you'll notice that most of these, actually all of these right now, are summer recreational activities. So we see a slight and marginal negative effect of climate change on outdoor recreation participation when we look at it by activity type. So the effect of climate change on outdoor recreation participation in Utah is fairly marginal relative to the effect of population growth. The biggest factor driving future outdoor recreation use in Utah is population growth, period. The effect of climate change is relatively marginal after we think about population growth. All right, but this isn't the same for all recreation activities. That was the top 8 recreational activities that are participated in by individuals on national forests. We look at the bottom 8, and so again, we're kind of just moving down this hierarchy of recreational activities, and we look at fishing, motorized water use, horseback riding, hunting, and again, we see big increases projected just based upon population growth, but individuals in certain activities are more sensitive to climate than other activities. So we look at projecting out numbers for primarily of interest to you guys is fishing and hunting. You see the estimated number of projected participant days in millions actually declining by 2060 relative to their current numbers. So the number of people who participate, the participant days, the number of days that people actually get out onto, in this case, a national forest to hunt or to fish, will be lower in 2060 than they are currently, based on our current projections. And the main factors that go into this are different. So the main kind of logical drivers that influence how individuals respond to climate are different for specific activities. So we know that fishing, motorized water use, and developed skiing, which is way down on the list, it's fairly obvious how it responds to increases in temperature. The specific mechanisms in ways people respond to climate and to those outdoor recreation opportunities is different for each activity, but we do know that based upon the way that people have responded to temperature increases in the past or more variable precipitation patterns in the past, that they're more likely not to come in the future relative to other recreational activities. All right, so in fishing, the key example is it might be preferences for fishing for cold-gilled species, for trout, as opposed to wanting to fish for warm-gilled species, wanting to fish for bass. It's rising stream temperatures affect fish populations, fish diversity, a whole bunch of different factors that actually go into what we've actually seen, this observed changes in fishing pressures on those months that is actually warmer. All right, so that takes me out of my discussion of climate change and how it affects recreation throughout the state. Now I want to highlight shifting social preferences and shifting kind of social norms for how individuals actually participate in outdoor recreation throughout the state. So here we see something we didn't see 10, 12 years ago. Somebody taking a selfie on a snowmobile, and this is a major factor affecting how people participate and enjoy nature and outdoor recreation worldwide. Nothing unique to Utah, but it has major implications for how we think about how we manage resources and primarily how we respond to this huge increase in demand that we're going to see over the coming years. All right, so probably everybody in here has some sort of social media presence. You know, Tom, except for Tom. So Tom is an outlier. But we know that it's becoming a much bigger component of individuals' social lives, of how individuals form communities. These are data on a proportion of the U.S. population that now has presence on one of these different social media platforms. About 79% of the U.S. adult population has a Facebook page, 32% are on Instagram, 31% on Pinterest, 29% on LinkedIn, which is not too social, it's more like a business thing, but, and Twitter, about 24% individuals have a Twitter account. So this has big implications for how we manage outdoor recreation resources. And well, first I want to kind of highlight how frequently people are using these pages. And you have individuals who are, or your families who are under 25 who are probably we're being classified in one of these three tiers when we look at daily use. So 76% of people who have Facebook page say they use Facebook daily. I'm not sure if in this survey, which is the Pew Center on survey research nationally, if they asked about how often people check it hourly or like every 10 minutes. There's definitely a segment of the population that would fall into that bracket. But the big takeaway message here is that these social media platforms are being used very frequently. They're being used by individuals to maintain connections, obviously, with their friends and family. They're also being used to seek out information about their activity preferences, their political preferences. We've done some initial research to think about, well, do people actually want to receive information about how natural resources are managed through different social media channels? We have a study coming out, this was actually from Crater Lake National Park up in Oregon, where we asked individuals who visited the park to think about different social media channels and would they want to receive different types of information about their visit to the national park from different information channels. And what we found was that individuals said that yes, we would actually use information if it was disseminated by, in this case, the Park Service, about what wildlife was in Crater Lake National Park, about which roads were closed. And what we found was that their preferences really were different for those different media channels, those different social media channels. Individuals wanted to see information about wildlife, about possible recreational activities that were available within the park on Instagram, where you have a very highly visual platform. Individuals wanted information about road closures, about seasonal weather conditions from Facebook, where it's a little bit more static. So this is our first attempt to really understand and have some good data that suggests that individuals will, one, seek out information from a natural resource management agency about information about how that recreational opportunities that are offered within that within a managed resource area, and the types of recreational opportunities that are offered within that area as well. So the take-home message here is that we think about all the factors, and primarily that key first factor I mentioned is big population pressure that's going to be, this big population growth rate that's going to be affecting the number of people who are participating in outdoor recreation. We have to know that as natural resource managers, our budgets are not increasing at that same rate as the population is growing. Right? We have to find ways to do more with less, and social media is one mechanism where we can think about how do we reach a broader proportion of the population very efficiently, very cost effectively, and have the same outcomes on affecting visitor behavior as we would if we would put up a new kiosk or to put up actually managed trails in a divert use or control use in a more direct way. We have a lot of research from the social sciences that suggests that the online communities that individuals form through different social media platforms is just as strong, influences their behavior just as much as their face-to-face communities. So we can disseminate information through key individuals who are partnering with natural resource management agencies, showing individuals responsible hiking behavior, responsible camping behavior. There's a good probability that those social norms that are engendered through social media will be picked up just as much as they would if you have somebody who is very trusted and highly respected in a small recreation group, a small group, the same way that individuals would adopt the same behaviors that they take while actually going out on a group face to face. So the social media, the social norms that are engendered through social media are just as strong as those that are engendered in face-to-face communities. We start to think about that as ways to actually influence and manage visitor use in the future. It's a new opportunity, some new territory, but I think one that really needs to be explored, particularly when I think about managing for this. I showed in a couple of slides before that 500 billion number of people who just are visiting the national forest, 500 billion visitor days to the national forest, just for people who are visiting or saying they're viewing nature by 2060. Right, so we have a lot. This big rising demand. It's one way to reach individuals very cost effectively, very efficiently in the future. Right, so I've kind of highlighted these different socio-demographic, environmental factors that are influencing recreation participation throughout the state, and then also highlighted some different ways that individuals are now engaging with nature, and starting to think about ways that we can actually leverage that as natural resource managers to actually capture and meet visitors where they're at, and that's online on social media. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Jordan, one of the things that has crossed my mind in Utah, so obviously as a state wildlife agency, Jordan and I had a chance to visit just briefly before his presentation, but one of the things that we're concerned about is keeping our customers coming through the front doors, i.e. hunters, anglers, shooters in some cases, and that sort of a thing. And just, you know, thinking about climatic variables out there and things like that, we sure see a lot of toxic algae blooms that are occurring in Utah, more so it seems like over the last couple of years, and I can't help but wonder what that does, you know, to somebody that wants to go to a body of water out there and recreate. So for example, at Hoop Lake this year at 9,000 feet, there was a toxic algae bloom up there. You know, it's not surrounded by any effluent discharges or anything like that, so I've got to think that there's some climatic factors that are going on there as well. But concerned about that. Have you looked at that at all? Any secondary effects of climate change that you've looked at like that?
Well, that's why I try to highlight hunting and fishing there is the two that have historically been the most sensitive to climate factors. And I mentioned the connections, how that actually works, the mechanistic connections for how an environment changes and then how outdoor recreationists behaviorally respond to that environment is different for each activity. But we definitely know from the historical data from the past 30 or 40 years that hunters and fishermen are responding differently or responding negatively to those climate-related effects. Whether it be more variable precipitation, just temperature increases, we know that reduces the number of times or whether or not they go out at all. So it's more than likely to be a continuing factor that affects participation rates.
You guys started to look at probably the rate, actually how much our youth is being priced out of recreation. Because when I was a kid, I could go do whatever I wanted. It was free, whatever it cost for a tank of gas. Now it's $15 to go to the canyon. It's $40 to get a campsite that you had to reserve 6 months ago. You know, a sled is $20,000. An ATV is $25,000. A motorcycle is $7 or $8. When you pick up a Honda 90 for what, 200? 20 years ago. You know, I see climate change and I see this, but I think for our youth, what's really concerning is they're being priced out, and the job market isn't keeping up. And what are we going to do about that as agencies? Keep our kids involved.
Yeah, I completely agree, and especially being as somebody who works at a university, gets to work with broke graduate students all day long. Maybe that's my fault. I don't pay enough. But so the factors, the equipment factors, a lot of that is out of the hands of the resource managers like yourself. Yeah. But we have done some recent research. We actually looked at an interesting comparative study. We looked at the visitors who went to Mill Creek Canyon. It requires a minimum day use fee, $3, or an annual fee, and then compared it to visitors to comparable recreation sites in Big Little Cottonwood Canyon and a couple sites of Harley Zone. And what we found was that it didn't have any effect on participation. The day use fee, that just the $3 fee didn't have any effect on participation for individuals who earned more than $25,000 a year. But those low-income individuals, the students, individuals who just earn less than $25,000 a year, they were significantly less likely to recreate in Mill Creek Canyon than either Big or Little Cottonwood Canyon. Controlling for all other factors except for that $3 fee. So it's a huge factor affecting recreation behavior. And even a minimal fee, like $3. It's not, I mean, it's a cup of coffee, but it's a major factor psychologically to individuals when they think about where am I going to go today? Am I going to go Big or Little Cottonwood Canyon where I can just park and just go, or am I going to go to Mill Creek where I know I have to pay that $3 fee? It does have a huge psychological effect. And there's a lot of different literature from behavioral economics that says that people respond hugely differently to something that's free as opposed to something that even has a very marginal cost. So as far as resource managers, and the biggest implication we made for that study with the Forest Service comparing Mill Creek to Big and Little Cottonwood was that we have to maintain free sites. We have to maintain free access to outdoor recreation if we want to ensure that we're capturing and allowing people to participate in outdoor recreation, the broadest portion of the population. Otherwise, we're excluding a significant proportion of the population, primarily those individuals who are low income. So it's a huge factor. And even, it's not just the big equipment cost, like $15,000 snowmobile, of course that's going to limit access, but it's just those minimal fees that are affecting use as well. Yeah.
You had the hunting and fishing categories on there. Was there a wildlife viewing category?
Yeah, so the wildlife viewing, I think
It's on the first slide of the big 8, not the bottom 8.
What is what?
yeah, it's just nature viewing, so it's not specific to wildlife, but that's definitely the most the activity that people say they participate in most when they visit a national forest in this case. So again, participation expected to double in people who say that they just visit for nature. And again, for most of these activities, by the time we project it out to 2060, use is going to double. But I'd say these small negative declines after we factor in the effects of climate.
The proportion of people coming in into the state from away, have you parsed out the source states? Probably the bigger states is where.
Yeah, and I don't know right off the top of my head, but I do know that most of them are employed in they call professional and technical services. So it's those individuals who have graduate educations, who are most likely earning more than $100,000 a year, making, those are the people who are migrating, or making these amenity migration transitions where they're moving to locations like Moab or here along the Wasatch Front because they offer better recreational opportunities and people can work from anywhere, right? So it's people who employ, I don't know exactly the geographic locations where they're coming from, but the dominant employment sector that they're employed in is professional and technical services. Yeah.
Well, listen, I'm going to date myself, but that's all right. Tom didn't mind. 30 years ago, we started looking.
He's not on social media either.
No, so I'm with you, Tom.
You guys are on top of that tree, Alan.
That's right. One of the things when we first started seeing these trends 30 years ago in fish and wildlife stuff, and started being concerned about it, particularly with kids, we used to talk, and some of the initial studies were about competition for time and what impact that has. Kids have soccer, every after-school activities, and I'm now raising a granddaughter at way too old an age for me to be doing this, but watching everything that she could possibly do connected to the school compared to when I went to school, or not even that long ago. Have you looked at this whole concept of competition for time at all anymore? Has that been put to bed? Now it's into more specifics.
I haven't seen it specifically related to outdoor recreation use, but my initial reaction would be that's a big barrier because there's so much travel time dependent upon outdoor recreation is very travel intensive. Even if you're living in Salt Lake, just trying to get out in one of the canyons, here it's probably 30 minutes to get to a taxi by the time you're hiking or running on a trail. So you think about that relative to taking your kid to the soccer park or the swimming pool. It's a lot less time demanding. So I haven't seen a lot of information on that relative to outdoor recreation use, but it is a big barrier.
Were ball sports, like organized team sports, considered outdoor recreation?
No, No, so this, the data that I presented, especially in these slides, was just for outdoor recreation activities that are managed and offered by our U.S. Forest Service lands. It's just because they've had the longest running visitor use monitoring program nationally.
One more for you, Jordan. I know you kind of downplayed the percent of Utah's population that's Hispanic. You know, those that identify as white are going to outpace the growth in the Hispanic population here in Utah, but I think the Hispanic population right now is about 13%.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, has the Institute at USU done any work looking at the way Hispanics recreate here in Utah? I'm looking for the Bible on how Hispanics recreate in the outdoors. They're one of our target audiences, I think, for the future of at least fishing in Utah.
Yeah.
And so just trying to understand how they recreate a little bit more.
Yeah, we haven't done anything specifically in Utah, but there is a large body of literature I can point you to that we know that there's definitely different activity preferences, larger social groups, larger group size. It's definitely more of a social activity when an individual is being motivated for solitude and the need to get away. So there's a lot of different factors like that we've seen nationwide. Every study that looks at different racial and ethnic differences in how people participate for group size to motivations that are pretty consistent. So a lot of that I would imagine is very, very similar to the Hispanic population in Utah.
Yeah, with the proliferation of social media these days and the ability for individuals to tag themselves at specific locations, I'm wondering if you're beginning to see specific patterns emerging for visitor use. I mean, are you seeing more visitation at these more popular areas, or is this also starting to spill out into more dispersed recreation? Or have we reached that point yet where these concentrated areas are so dense now that we're starting to see spill out?
I think the biggest finding that we've seen is that we can actually use social media data. So a couple projects I didn't specifically talk about, we're actually using social media data now to estimate visitor use to managed areas. So every single time you take a photo, post it to Facebook or to Instagram, it goes up with what they call a geotag. It has the latitude and longitude of where that photo was taken, and so that's all public information. You can scrape that data from the web, count up the number of points, and that's actually a very reliable indicator of the number of people visiting the area. And so what we see is not really a difference in whether or not people are visiting urban locations or major tourism destinations relative to dispersed areas, but we're seeing that now we actually have a really good way to measure use in dispersed recreational areas. Because primarily before we did like backcountry skiing. Even with this longitudinal study of national forest use, we never send anybody out to, just ride up and down big or little Cottonwood Canyon and look for cars parked on the side of the road for people who might be skinning in and then skiing down, just because it's not a managed recreation site by, in this case, the Forest Service. But if they take those photos and wherever they're at, we actually have a way to capture that use. So what we're seeing is that we have a good way to actually measure dispersed use now that we didn't actually have before. Wilderness areas, wilderness study areas, a lot of those locations are places that now we have a way to actually know how many people are using those areas before. So I don't think we're really seeing a difference in where people are actually going, but we're actually seeing we now have a really viable metric to see in those really dispersed areas where people we have no way to capture visitor use before. Now we have a way to do it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jordan.
You're not going to know where I'm going.
Please do so now. Anybody not sign the sheet? So Sean can have that.
You're not going to take any pictures on your phone and post them on Facebook?
Nope, never done it. Not once in my life.
I might have to start putting a couple of pictures of you on Facebook.